The lunch rush at Murphy's Deli in downtown San Diego was nothing special. Steam rose from the griddle, the cash register chimed its familiar tune, and customers shuffled through the line with the practiced patience of office workers on their 30-minute break. Behind the counter, Sarah Mitchell moved with efficient precision, her hands working the assembly line of bread, meat, and condiments like she'd done it 1,000 times before. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. She was just another face in the crowd of service workers keeping the city fed, until Commander Jake Harrison walked through the door and everything changed. The morning had started like any other Tuesday for Sarah Mitchell. Her alarm buzzed at 5:30 a.m. in her modest studio apartment 3 blocks from the ocean. The routine was automatic now. Shower, coffee, 20-minute walk to Murphy's Deli where she'd been working for the past 8 months. Nothing remarkable about her life, nothing that would make anyone look twice. Sarah preferred it that way. Murphy's Deli sat wedged between a dry cleaner and a pharmacy on Fifth Avenue, the kind of place that survived on regulars and lunch crowds from the nearby office buildings. The owner, Frank Murphy, was a gruff 60-something with calloused hands who'd hired Sarah without asking too many questions. She showed up on time, worked hard, and kept to herself. That was enough for Frank. The deli served the usual suspects: turkey clubs, roast beef sandwiches, Italian subs loaded with salami and provolone. Sarah had memorized every order, every customer preference, every shortcut to get through the lunch rush without breaking a sweat. She wore the standard uniform, black apron over dark jeans, her brown hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, sleeves rolled up to her elbows as she worked. It was those rolled-up sleeves that would change everything. Commander Jake Harrison had been stationed at Naval Base San Diego for 2 years, but this was his first time stepping into Murphy's Deli. His usual spot was the Mexican place 6 blocks over, but a recommendation from his teammate had brought him here during his lunch break. Fresh off a classified briefing that had left his mind spinning with details he couldn't discuss with anyone outside his unit, Jake was looking forward to 30 minutes of normalcy. He was third in line, checking emails on his phone, when something caught his peripheral vision. Behind the counter, a woman was assembling a sandwich with practiced efficiency. Turkey, Swiss, lettuce, tomato, nothing unusual there. But as she reached for the mustard dispenser, her sleeve rode up slightly, exposing her left forearm. Jake's blood ran cold. There, etched into her skin in faded black ink, was a mark he'd only seen in classified briefings. A series of numbers and symbols that weren't supposed to exist anymore. Numbers that belonged to a program that had been officially terminated 15 years ago. Numbers that identified someone who should have been dead. The woman, Sarah, according to her name tag, seemed oblivious to his stare. She finished the sandwich, wrapped it in white paper, and handed it to the customer ahead of him. Her movements were fluid, practiced, but Jake noticed something else now. The way she kept her left side angled away from customers. The way her sleeve was carefully positioned to cover most of her forearm. The deliberate casualness that only came from years of hiding something. Next, Sarah called, and Jake found himself stepping forward. Up close, he could see more details that his training had taught him to notice. The small scar above her right eyebrow, the kind that came from a specific type of impact. The way she held her shoulders, straight but ready to move. The callus on her right hand, between thumb and forefinger, that most people wouldn't recognize, but Jake knew came from thousands of hours of weapons training. "What can I get you?" Sarah asked, her voice pleasant but professional. Her eyes met his briefly before focusing on the sandwich ingredients behind the glass. "Turkey club," Jake managed, his mind racing. "Light mayo." As Sarah began assembling his order, Jake studied the tattoo more carefully. The numbers were partially visible. 47-something-92. The rest was hidden by fabric, but he didn't need to see the complete sequence. He'd memorized those designations during the briefing just 6 months ago, when his unit had been tasked with tracking down remaining assets from Project Blackwater. Project Blackwater had been the Navy's most classified psychological operations program, running from 2003 to 2009. Officially, it had trained specialists in deep cover infiltration and psychological warfare. Unofficially, it had created something closer to human weapons, Operatives who could disappear into any population, assume any identity, and eliminate targets without leaving a trace. The program had been shut down after a congressional investigation revealed its existence. All records were sealed. All operatives were either reassigned or discharged. According to every official document Jake had access to, there were no active Blackwater assets remaining. Yet here was Sarah Mitchell making turkey sandwiches in a San Diego deli with a classification tattoo that marked her as Operative 4729. Sarah finished his sandwich and slid it across the counter. "That'll be $8.50. Jake handed her a 10, watching her face carefully. "Thanks." Sarah's smile was genuine but didn't reach her eyes. As she turned to ring up the sale, her sleeve shifted again, revealing one more crucial detail: a second mark, smaller and harder to see. A date: 09/15/09. September 15th, 2009. The day Project Blackwater was officially terminated. Jake took his sandwich and found a table near the window, his appetite forgotten. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found Lieutenant Commander Maria Santos, his intelligence liaison. He needed to make a call, but not from here, not where Sarah could overhear. As the lunch rush continued around him, Jake watched Sarah work. She moved like someone who'd spent years blending in, becoming invisible in plain sight. Every gesture was calculated to appear normal, unremarkable. But now that he knew what to look for, Jake could see through the facade. The way she tracked every customer's position without appearing to watch them. How she kept her back to the wall whenever possible. The unconscious habit of scanning exits and sightlines. These weren't the behaviors of a deli worker. They were the ingrained reflexes of someone trained for operations that didn't officially exist. Sarah Mitchell, whoever she really was, had been living a lie for 8 months, maybe longer. The question that burned in Jake's mind as he sat in that cramped deli wasn't whether he should report her. Protocol demanded it. The question was why someone with her training and clearance level had chosen to disappear into the most ordinary life imaginable, and what she might do if she realized her cover had been blown. Jake finished his sandwich without tasting it, watching Sarah serve customer after customer with the same practiced smile. But now he noticed the tension in her shoulders, the way her eyes flicked toward him just a second too long when she thought he wasn't looking. She knew something was wrong. Her training was telling her she'd been made. The lunch rush was winding down when Jake finally stood to leave. As he walked past the counter, Sarah looked up from wiping down the workspace. For just a moment, their eyes met directly. In that instant, Jake saw something that chilled him more than the classified tattoo or the suspicious scars. He saw recognition, not of him personally, but of what he represented. Sarah knew exactly what kind of man would notice details that everyone else missed. She knew a hunter when she saw one. Jake nodded politely and walked out into the San Diego sunshine, his mind already working through the implications. Protocol said he should call this in immediately. His training said he should treat her as a potential threat until proven otherwise. But something in Sarah Mitchell's eyes suggested that calling this in might be the last mistake he ever made. Behind him, through the deli's front window, Sarah continued her afternoon routine. But Jake could feel her watching him walk away, calculating distances and angles with the unconscious precision of someone who'd been taught to see every interaction as a potential battlefield. The turkey club had been excellent. Jake had a feeling it might be the last normal meal he'd have for a very long time. 3 hours after Jake Harrison left the deli, Sarah Mitchell's hands were still steady as she cleaned the industrial coffee machine. But her mind was racing through contingency plans she'd hoped never to use again. The naval officer had been good, better than most. He'd controlled his reaction when he spotted her tattoo, maintained casual body language, even finished his sandwich before leaving. A civilian would have missed the signs entirely. But Sarah had spent 6 years learning to read people like blueprints, and Jake Harrison's micro-expressions told a story he probably didn't realize he was broadcasting. Interest, recognition, calculation, and underneath it all, the professional courtesy of one predator acknowledging another. Sarah finished closing the deli at 4:30 p.m., same as always. She helped Frank count the register, wiped down the last surfaces, and locked the front door behind them. But instead of taking her usual route home, she turned left on Fifth Avenue and disappeared into the maze of downtown San Diego's business district. 20 minutes of practiced surveillance detection later, Sarah was satisfied she wasn't being followed, at least not by amateurs. Her studio apartment looked exactly as she'd left it that morning, but Sarah's trained eyes caught details that would have escaped most people. The dust pattern on her nightstand had been disturbed. Someone had been inside. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So, if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Sarah didn't panic. Panic was a luxury she'd been trained out of 15 years ago. Instead, she moved through the apartment with systematic precision, cataloging what had been searched and how professionally it had been done. Whoever had been here knew their business. They'd photographed documents, checked her computer, even examined the contents of her medicine cabinet. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd left her emergency bag untouched. Hidden behind a false panel in her bedroom closet, the go bag contained everything Sarah needed to disappear. Cash, fake identification documents, prepaid cell phone, and a Sig Sauer P226 that hadn't been fired in 8 months. She'd hoped never to touch it again. Sarah sat on her bed, weighing her options. She could run, disappear into the wind like she'd done before, establish a new identity in a different city. She'd done it successfully once. She could do it again. But running meant abandoning the closest thing to a normal life she'd ever known. It meant Frank Murphy would spend tomorrow wondering why his most reliable employee had vanished without explanation. More importantly, running meant accepting that she'd never be free of what she'd been. Her secure phone buzzed once. A text from a number she didn't recognize. Coffee shop on 7th and B Street. 1 hour. Come alone. Sarah stared at the message. Protocol from her old life dictated she should ignore it, or better yet, use it as an opportunity to eliminate whoever was trying to make contact. But something about the tone felt different. Not threatening. Almost respectful. Against every instinct she developed over the past 8 months of civilian life, Sarah Mitchell decided to take the meeting. The coffee shop was a hipster establishment with exposed brick walls and mismatched furniture, the kind of place where conversations could be conducted without drawing attention. Jake Harrison sat in a corner booth, positioned to watch both entrances, a half-empty cup of black coffee growing cold in front of him. Sarah entered exactly 1 hour after receiving the text, her eyes sweeping the room in a pattern Jake recognized from his own training. She'd changed clothes, dark jeans, gray hoodie, sneakers suitable for running. Her hair was down, partially obscuring her face, but she moved with the same controlled precision he'd noticed at the deli. She ordered a green tea at the counter before approaching his table, giving herself time to assess threats and exit routes. When she finally sat across from him, her hands remained visible on the table, a gesture Jake read as both non-threatening and strategically sound. "Commander Harrison," Sarah said quietly, "I assume you've had an interesting afternoon." "You could say that." Jake studied her face, looking for tells. "Though I have to admit, your file makes for fascinating reading. The parts that aren't redacted, anyway." Sarah's expression didn't change, but Jake caught the slight tightening around her eyes. "I think you have me confused with someone else. I make sandwiches." Sarah Elizabeth Mitchell, born in Portland, Oregon, 1985, enlisted in the Navy at 18, showed exceptional aptitude for languages and psychological assessment. Jake kept his voice conversational, but each word was precisely chosen. Selected for advanced training in 2003. After that, the record gets creative. Sounds like someone with an interesting life. Not me, though. Jake leaned forward slightly. The apartment search was very professional. My compliments to whoever handles your security these days. But they missed the motion sensors I placed yesterday afternoon. This time, Sarah's reaction was unmistakable.
A flash of surprise quickly suppressed. She'd assumed the search had happened after their encounter at the deli. Learning it had been planned before revealed an entirely different scenario. "You've been watching me," she said. "Not me personally, but someone has been. The question is why." Jake pulled out his phone and slid it across the table. On the screen was a classified document header she recognized. Project Blackwater, Asset Recovery Operations. Sarah's blood turned to ice water. Asset recovery was military speak for hunting down and eliminating compromised operatives. "How long?" she asked, abandoning any pretense of being just a deli worker. The hunt for remaining Blackwater assets began 18 months ago. Most were accounted for quickly. Reassignments, medical discharges, a few unfortunate accidents. But 3 names stayed on the list. 3 operatives who'd gone completely dark after the program ended. Jake retrieved his phone, and Sarah noticed his movements were careful, non-threatening. Whatever this conversation was, he wasn't treating her as an immediate enemy. Operative 4725 was found 6 months ago in Minneapolis, working as a bartender. He came in quietly, accepted relocation to a secure facility. Operative 4731 was located in Denver 3 months ago. She didn't come quietly. Sarah absorbed this information, her mind automatically calculating implications. 2 down, 1 to go, and she was the one. "That leaves Operative 4729, Jake continued. "Real name classified, last known location classified, current status classified. Until yesterday, when a routine sweep of facial recognition data in Southern California got a hit. A deli worker in San Diego whose bone structure matched archived photos from before extensive plastic surgery. The admission that they'd identified her through facial recognition despite surgical alterations sent a chill down Sarah's spine. The technology had advanced further than she'd realized. "So what now?" Sarah asked. "You found me. Mission accomplished." "Here's the thing," Jake said, and his tone shifted slightly. "I'm not asset recovery. I'm intelligence. And the more I dig into Project Blackwater, the more questions I have about why it was really shut down." Sarah waited, reading the subtext in Jake's words. This wasn't a capture operation. This was something else entirely. "You want to know what I think happened?" Jake continued. "I think someone in the Pentagon got scared of what they'd created. 15 operatives trained beyond anything in the official playbooks, with skill sets that made them more dangerous than entire special forces units. So they terminated the program, scattered the operators, and hoped everyone would quietly disappear into normal lives."
Sounds reasonable, Sarah said carefully, except for one problem. Someone's been killing former Blackwater assets. Not officially, these deaths don't appear in any government reports. Car accidents, heart attacks, random muggings gone wrong. But when I ran the statistical analysis, the mortality rate among your former colleagues is running about 400% higher than comparable demographic groups. Sarah felt pieces of a puzzle clicking into place in her mind. The supposedly routine deaths Jake was describing matched patterns she'd been taught to recognize, professional eliminations disguised as accidents.
"You think someone's cleaning the house?"
She said, "I know someone's cleaning house. The question is who and why now?"
Jake pulled up another document on his phone, casualty reports, with names, dates, and causes of death. Sarah recognized several names from her training days. Good operators, careful operators, the kind of people who didn't die in random accidents.
Operative 47258, the bartender in Minneapolis, official report says he died of a heart attack 2 weeks after being relocated to the secure facility. The toxicology report was classified. Operative 47311 in Denver was killed resisting arrest, but 3 witnesses said she was complying when shots were fired.
Sarah's professional instincts were fully engaged now. The pattern Jake was describing wasn't random cleanup. It was systematic elimination of potential witnesses to something bigger.
"What do you need from me?" she asked.
Information. You were there from the beginning, enlisted in Blackwater during its 2nd year, trained directly under the original program architects. You worked operations that the current intelligence apparatus doesn't have records of. If someone's trying to bury the past, You're one of the few people who knows what they're trying to hide.
Sarah considered this. Cooperating with Jake meant abandoning her carefully constructed civilian identity, but if he was right about the systematic eliminations, that identity was already compromised.
There's something else, Jake said, his voice dropping lower. The asset recovery operation targeting you, it's not official Pentagon business. The funding comes from a black budget account that shouldn't exist, managed by people whose names don't appear in any organizational charts.
This was the piece of information that made Sarah's decision. Unofficial kill teams meant someone with serious resources and government connections wanted Blackwater assets dead, someone who couldn't risk official channels.
The operations I worked, Sarah said slowly, weren't all foreign targets. Some of them were domestic. American citizens who posed threats to national security or to specific people in power.
Jake nodded, as if he'd suspected as much. Politicians, military contractors, intelligence officials?
All of the above. Blackwater wasn't just about creating the perfect covert operators. It was about creating operators with no official existence, no traceable connections to government agencies. Plausible deniability taken to its logical extreme.
Sarah paused, studying Jake's face. You really don't know what you've stumbled into, do you?
Enlighteningly, Project Blackwater wasn't terminated because Congress discovered it. Congress was told about it because someone needed a reason to shut it down quickly. The real reason was that we'd started asking questions about our missions, questions about why American citizens were being targeted and who was making those targeting decisions.
Jake absorbed this, his expression growing grimmer. How many domestic operations?
Over 3 years, dozens. Politicians who are getting too close to classified programs, journalists investigating defense contractors, a few military officers who discovered financial irregularities in Pentagon budgets. Sarah's voice was clinical, professional. We were told they were all legitimate national security threats. It took us 2 years to realize we were actually working as a private assassination service for people with the right connections and enough money.
The coffee shop continued its normal evening routine around them. Students studying, couples talking quietly, the barista cleaning equipment for closing. But at their corner table, Jake and Sarah were discussing murders that had shaped the political landscape of the early 2000s.
That's why they're cleaning the house now, Jake said. Someone's planning something big enough that they can't risk any Blackwater assets coming forward with information about previous operations.
Sarah nodded. The question is what and when? Jake's phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced at it, and Sarah saw his expression change immediately.
We need to leave, now.
What is it? Jake was already standing, dropping a 20 on the table. Facial recognition alert just went active. 3 black SUVs with government plates just turned on 7th Street. Sarah was moving before he finished speaking, muscle memory from her training taking over. They exited through the coffee shop's rear door into an alley that connected to a parking structure 2 blocks away. As they reached Jake's truck, Sarah could hear sirens in the distance. Not police sirens, but the distinctive electronic wail of federal emergency vehicles.
Where to? Jake asked, starting the engine.
Sarah looked back toward the coffee shop, where she could see black vehicles converging on the building they'd just left. Her 8-month experiment in normal life was officially over. I know a place, she said. But first, we need to talk about what you're really willing to sacrifice to get answers about Project Blackwater. Jake pulled out of the parking structure, taking a circuitous route toward the interstate. What do you mean? I mean that once we start down this path, there's no going back to your normal life either. The people hunting me have resources, connections, and a very strong motivation to keep certain secrets buried. If you help me, you will become a target too. Jake considered this as they merged onto I-5, putting distance between themselves and the federal teams that were undoubtedly searching the coffee shop and surrounding area. The alternative is letting them succeed in covering up whatever they're planning, he said, finally. The alternative is staying alive. Sometimes those aren't compatible options. Sarah smiled for the first time since their conversation began. It wasn't a pleasant smile, but it was genuine. Now you're starting to think like a Blackwater operative. The safe house was a nondescript bungalow in Chula Vista, 15 miles south of San Diego, and close enough to the Mexican border to offer additional exit options if needed. Sarah had established it during her 3rd month of civilian life, following protocols that were now proving their worth. Jake parked his truck 3 blocks away, and they approached the house through a series of backyards and side streets. Sarah's movements were automatic. Check for surveillance, vary the route, never approach a safe location directly. Habits that had kept her alive for 6 years of active operations. The house looked abandoned from the outside, complete with overgrown landscaping and a for rent sign that had been weathered by months of sun and rain. But inside, Sarah had stocked everything needed for extended operations: secure communications equipment, weapons, cash reserves, and false documentation for 3 different identities. "Impressive setup," Jake said, examining the surveillance monitors that showed feeds from hidden cameras covering all approaches to the house. "How many of these do you have?" "This is the only one in California. There are others." Sarah activated the secure communication system, her fingers moving across the keyboard with practiced efficiency. "But first, we need to figure out who's really hunting us." Jake settled into a chair while Sarah worked, studying the tactical maps and equipment layouts that covered one wall of the house. Everything was organized with military precision, but there was something else, an attention to detail that went beyond standard operational planning. "You've been preparing for this day since you went underground," he observed. "Every day for 8 months." Sarah's voice was matter-of-fact. "I knew they'd come eventually. The only question was whether they'd send professionals or amateurs." The computer screen flickered to life, displaying encrypted data streams from sources Jake didn't recognize. Sarah's access to classified information systems was apparently still active, despite her official non-existence. "How do you still have clearance?" Jake asked. "I don't. But when you spend 6 years learning to penetrate any security system, some skills transfer to the civilian world." Sarah pulled up financial records, communication intercepts, and personnel files. "The kill team that tried to grab us tonight, I'm tracking their funding sources." Jake watched her work, impressed despite himself. Sarah's computer skills were beyond anything he'd seen from active intelligence personnel. She moved through secure databases like they were public websites, extracting information that should have been impossible to access. "There," Sarah said, highlighting a series of financial transfers. "The operation tonight was funded through 3 shell companies, all of which trace back to one source: Meridian Strategic Solutions." Jake recognized the name. Defense contractor. They handle logistics for special operations worldwide. They also handle less official services for clients with specialized needs. Sarah brought up Meridian's corporate structure, revealing a complex web of subsidiaries and holding companies. "Look at their board of directors." Jake scanned the names, his expression growing darker with each entry. 2 former Pentagon officials, 3 retired generals, a former CIA deputy director, and several politicians who'd served on defense appropriations committees. "This isn't just about covering up past operations," Jake said. "This is about protecting current ones." Sarah nodded. "Blackwater assets aren't being eliminated because we know about old missions. We're being eliminated because we might recognize new ones." She pulled up another file: recent unexplained deaths of journalists, politicians, and business leaders across the United States. The pattern was subtle but unmistakable to someone trained to recognize professional eliminations. Senator Patricia Williams, killed in a car accident 3 weeks ago. She was investigating defense contractor fraud. Sarah highlighted another entry: technology executive David Chen, apparent suicide by gunshot 2 months ago. His company was developing encryption software that couldn't be broken by government agencies. Jake studied the list, recognizing some names from recent news coverage. These weren't Blackwater operations. The program was shut down 15 years ago. The official program was shut down. But look at the methodology: single vehicle accidents that destroy evidence, suicides with no warning signs, heart attacks in healthy individuals with no medical history. These are Blackwater techniques being used by active operators. Sarah brought up another screen showing personnel records from various defense contractors and government agencies. Jake saw the pattern immediately: dozens of individuals with military backgrounds and psychological profiles matching Blackwater selection criteria, all hired within the past 5 years. "They rebuilt the program," he said. "They improved it. No official military connection, no congressional oversight, no traceable government funding. Just a private company providing specialized services to clients who can afford them."
Jake absorbed the implications. "How many active operators do you estimate?" "Based on the mission tempo and geographic spread,
At least 20, possibly more. All trained using Blackwater protocols, but with no knowledge of the original program's history. They probably think they're conducting legitimate national security operations. Sarah's analysis was interrupted by an alert from the surveillance system. One of the external cameras had detected movement in the street, a sedan with darkened windows conducting what appeared to be a routine patrol, but moving too slowly and too systematically to be civilian traffic. "They found us," Jake said. Sarah was already moving, shutting down the computer systems and activating data destruction protocols. "Not us, the house. I used electronic surveillance to track Meridian's funding, which means they could track the intrusion back to this location." Jake checked his weapon while Sarah gathered essential equipment, secure phone, tactical gear, and a hard drive containing the intelligence they'd gathered. The methodical approach to evacuation spoke to years of operational experience. "There's a drainage tunnel that connects to the storm system 3 blocks away," Sarah said. "We can reach it through the basement." They were moving toward the basement stairs when Sarah's secure phone rang. The caller ID showed only a number, no name, no location data. Sarah hesitated, then answered. "Operative 4729. The voice was electronically distorted, but speaking the old Blackwater protocols. Sarah went completely still. Jake saw her expression change from tactical alertness to something approaching shock. "This frequency is supposed to be dead," she said into the phone. "As are you, according to official records. We need to meet." "Who is this?" "Someone who knows what you've discovered tonight, and someone who can tell you why your former colleagues are really being eliminated." Jake watched Sarah process this unexpected contact, her training clearly at war with curiosity about someone who knew Blackwater communication protocols. "Location?" she asked. "Balboa Park, Botanical Garden, tomorrow at 0800. Come alone, but bring your new friend. He's been asking the right questions in the wrong places." The line went dead. Sarah stared at the phone, her mind clearly racing through possibilities and implications. "Trap?" Jake asked. "Almost certainly. But whoever that was knew you were with me, which means they've been monitoring our activities in real time. If they wanted us dead, they could have coordinated with the teams outside." Sarah moved to the surveillance monitors, studying the sedan that was still conducting its slow patrol pattern. "They're not moving to assault positions. They're just watching." Jake joined her at the monitors. "Containment, not capture. They want to know where we will go next." Which means the meeting in Balboa Park is the real objective. Sarah shut down the remaining systems, plunging the house into darkness except for the glow from the surveillance screens. Someone wants to talk to us badly enough to orchestrate this entire scenario. They made their way to the basement through the darkened house, Jake following Sarah's lead as she navigated by memory and tactical instinct. The basement contained additional surprises, a fully stocked armory, communication equipment, and the entrance to the drainage tunnel Sarah had mentioned. "How much time and money did you invest in this setup?" Jake asked. "Everything I had. When you've spent 6 years as a government assassin, retirement planning takes on a different perspective." The tunnel was concrete and steel, large enough for maintenance crews, but requiring them to move in a crouch. Sarah led with a tactical flashlight, checking for obstacles and potential ambush points. After 15 minutes of careful progress, they emerged through a storm drain into an industrial area 2 miles from the house. Jake's truck was compromised, so Sarah led them to a different vehicle, a nondescript Honda Civic parked in a 24-hour supermarket lot. The keys were hidden in a magnetic box, another element of her carefully planned contingencies. "Where did you learn this level of operational planning?" Jake asked as they drove toward a motel on the outskirts of the city. "Necessity. After Blackwater was officially terminated, I spent 2 years moving between safe houses, never staying in one place longer than a few weeks. You develop skills when the alternative is death." They checked into the Sunset Motel Lodge using cash and fake identification Sarah provided. The room was standard budget accommodation, 2 beds, a small television, and the kind of anonymity that comes from being completely forgettable. Sarah immediately began her post-operation routine, checking for surveillance devices, establishing sightlines to exits, and setting up early warning systems using items from the motel's complimentary supplies. Jake watched her work, recognizing the same meticulous approach he'd seen in special operations veterans. "The person on the phone," Jake said. Sarah paused in her security sweep. 3 possibilities. Another surviving Blackwater operative who's been deeper underground than I was. Someone from the Pentagon who was involved in the original program termination. Or what? Someone from the new program who's developed concerns about their missions and needs experienced consultation. Jake considered these options while Sarah completed her security preparations. Each possibility implied different threat levels and tactical approaches. If it's another original operative, they'd want to coordinate resistance against the elimination teams. If it's the Pentagon, they might be offering some kind of deal, protection in exchange for silence. If it's a new program, Jake trailed off, working through the implications. If it's a new program, they've discovered something about their missions that doesn't match what they were told, something that made them seek out original Blackwater assets for answers. Sarah sat on one of the beds, finally allowing herself a moment to process the evening's developments. There's a 4th possibility we haven't discussed, which is, it's a setup designed to gather all remaining threats in one location for simultaneous elimination. Jake nodded grimly. Balboa Park would be tactically advantageous for that kind of operation. Multiple approach routes, civilian cover, easy extraction for hostile forces. But also multiple escape routes for us, familiar terrain, and public spaces that make large-scale operations risky. Sarah pulled up maps of Balboa Park on her phone, studying the layout of the botanical garden and surrounding areas. If we're walking into a trap, we'll know within the first few minutes. They spent the next hour planning approaches and contingencies for the morning meeting, their conversation revealing the depth of tactical training they both possessed. Jake's special operations background complemented Sarah's Blackwater experience, creating a planning dynamic that was both collaborative and highly professional. "There's something else we need to discuss," Sarah said as they concluded their tactical planning. "What happens if we survive tomorrow's meeting and confirm that Meridian is running an active assassination program?" Jake had been wondering the same thing. "Officially, we report it through proper channels and hope someone in the Pentagon or intelligence community takes action. And unofficially, we probably end up dead within a week, along with anyone we might have reported to." Sarah nodded. "Which means if we're going to stop this, we need to do it ourselves. No official support, no backup, no legal protection if things go wrong." Jake studied her face, reading the implications of what she was suggesting. "You're talking about going after Meridian directly. I'm talking about doing what Blackwater trained me to do, identifying threats to national security and eliminating them through any means necessary." The room fell silent as both of them contemplated the magnitude of what they were considering. Taking on a well-funded, professionally operated assassination program would require every skill they possessed, along with a willingness to operate outside legal boundaries. "The people running Meridian's assassination program," Jake said finally, "they're using our own tax dollars to eliminate American citizens. Politicians, journalists, business leaders, anyone who threatens their interests. And they're using operators trained with American military techniques, funded through defense contracts, protected by government connections. It's treason with a corporate logo." Jake made his decision. "Tomorrow's meeting first. Then we figure out how to take down the people who turned assassination into a business model." Sarah smiled, and this time it held genuine warmth. "Now you're definitely thinking like a Blackwater operative." Outside their motel room window, the lights of San Diego stretched toward the ocean. Normal life continuing for millions of people who had no idea their government had been hijacked by private interests. But in room 237 of the Sunset Motel, 2 people with the skills to fight back were planning to restore the balance. The meeting in Balboa Park would determine whether they were walking towards answers or into the crosshairs of the most sophisticated assassination program ever created. Either way, Sarah Mitchell's days of making sandwiches were officially over.
The Balboa Park Botanical Garden opened to the public at 7 a.m., but Sarah and Jake had been in position since 5:30, using the pre-dawn darkness to establish overwatch positions and identify potential threats. Sarah occupied a maintenance shed with clear sightlines to the meeting location, while Jake positioned himself near the park's main entrance to monitor approaching vehicles. At exactly 8 a.m., a woman in her 50s approached the designated meeting spot. She moved with the controlled gait of someone accustomed to command, her gray hair pulled back in a practical style that suggested military background. She wore civilian clothes, dark pants, modest jacket, but carried herself with an authority that was unmistakable. Sarah's earpiece crackled with Jake's voice. Positive identification on our contact. No visible backup, but 3 vehicles with government plates parked at various locations around the park perimeter. Copy that. She's alone at the immediate location. Sarah studied the woman through her scope. Something about her posture and bearing triggered a memory from Sarah's training days. Jake, I think I know who this is. Sarah left her overwatch position and approached the meeting location, keeping her hands visible and maintaining situational awareness. The woman turned as Sarah approached, and recognition flashed in both their eyes simultaneously. Colonel Rebecca Martinez, Sarah said quietly. Former Blackwater Program Director. Former is correct, and you're Elena Vasquez, though you've been using the name Sarah Mitchell for the past 8 months. Martinez's voice carried the same no-nonsense tone Sarah remembered from training briefings 15 years ago. Sarah felt pieces of a much larger puzzle clicking into place. Elena Vasquez had been her real name, before Blackwater, before the plastic surgery, before the complete identity reconstruction that had turned her into Sarah Mitchell.
"You're supposed to be dead," Sarah said. "Killed in a helicopter crash in Afghanistan, 2010. Reports of my death were strategically necessary. Please, we have limited time before this location becomes compromised." Jake's voice came through Sarah's earpiece. Additional vehicles approaching from the north, moving to a secondary position. Martinez gestured toward a bench partially concealed by flowering bushes. "Your companion should join us. What I have to say affects him as well." Sarah signaled Jake, who approached from a different angle, his hand resting casually near his concealed weapon. Martinez noticed the positioning but didn't react with alarm. "Commander Harrison," Martinez said, "your investigation into Blackwater casualties has attracted attention from people who prefer their activities remain unexamined." "You're the source providing intelligence about asset eliminations," Jake said, studying Martinez's face for tells. "I'm one of several sources. The systematic elimination of original Blackwater operatives began 18 months ago, coinciding with Meridian Strategic Solutions receiving a classified contract worth $200 million annually. Martinez produced a tablet showing them classified documents that detailed Meridian's expanded operations. Sarah recognized the formatting and classification markings from her time in the program. Meridian wasn't just rebuilding Blackwater, Martinez continued. They were improving it. No military oversight, no congressional knowledge, no traceable government connection. A completely privatized assassination program serving clients who can afford premium rates for problem elimination. Jake scanned the documents, his expression growing grimmer with each page. Domestic and international targets. Politicians, business leaders, journalists, military officers, anyone who threatens specific interests. "The business model is elegant in its simplicity," Martinez said. "Defense contractors, pharmaceutical companies, technology corporations, political organizations, they all face individuals who could damage their operations or reveal inconvenient truths. Meridian eliminates those individuals for a fee using techniques and personnel trained with taxpayer funding." Sarah studied her former commanding officer, reading the stress lines and exhaustion that suggested Martinez had been fighting this battle for months. "Why contact us now?" Sarah asked. "Why reveal yourself?" Because tomorrow morning, Meridian is implementing what they call Operation Clean Slate, the simultaneous elimination of 17 targets across the United States. Politicians, journalists, and business leaders who've been investigating various aspects of the shadow economy that funds private military operations. Jake's tactical mind immediately grasped the implications. 17 coordinated assassinations would destabilize multiple ongoing investigations and send a clear message to anyone else considering similar inquiries. The targets include Senator Elizabeth Warren, who's been investigating defense contractor fraud; Michael Hastings Jr., son of the journalist who's been writing about private military companies; Dr. Amanda Chen, whose research into government surveillance programs has attracted unwanted attention. Sarah recognized several names from her research the previous night. These are the people whose deaths would most benefit Meridian's client base. Martinez nodded grimly. The operation uses 12 active Meridian operatives, supported by logistics teams and cleanup crews. Each target will be eliminated using different methods: car accidents, medical emergencies, apparent suicides, random violence. No pattern that would suggest coordination. Except you know about it, Jake said. How? Because I've been tracking Meridian's operations since their inception. The Pentagon created me to run Blackwater, but they forgot to terminate my security clearances when they faked my death. I've been operating as a ghost in the system, gathering intelligence and attempting to identify their full network. Sarah's earpiece buzzed with an alert from the surveillance app she'd placed on her phone. Multiple vehicles were converging on the park from different directions, too many to be coincidental. "We need to move," Sarah said. "Company's arriving." Martina stood, her movements still crisp despite obvious fatigue. "There's a storage facility in National City where I've compiled everything: financial records, operational plans, personnel files, client lists, everything needed to expose the entire network." She handed Sarah a key and a piece of paper with an address: Unit 247. But be aware that accessing that information will trigger security protocols that will reveal your location to Meridian within hours. Jake was already moving toward their predetermined extraction route. How do we stop Operation Clean Slate? By doing what we were trained to do: eliminate the threat using any means necessary. Martinez's voice carried the same command authority Sarah remembered from training. Meridian's operational headquarters is in a secure facility outside Temecula. 12 operatives plus support staff, all concentrated in one location for the final mission briefing tonight. Sarah absorbed this information while scanning for threats. "You're suggesting we assault a fortified position defended by professional operators using our own techniques?" "I'm suggesting that 17 innocent Americans will die tomorrow unless someone with the appropriate skills takes action tonight." They reached the park's eastern exit, where Jake had positioned their vehicle. I could see black SUVs approaching from multiple directions, their movement patterns indicating professional surveillance teams. "One more thing," Martinez said as they prepared to separate. "The person authorizing Operation Clean Slate isn't some anonymous corporate executive. It's Deputy Defense Secretary Thomas Brennan, a man with access to classified intelligence and personal relationships with everyone who could investigate Meridian's activities." Jake stopped walking. "Brennan's been briefing the Joint Chiefs on counterterrorism operations for the past 3 years. And using that access to identify threats to his private business interests. Meridian Strategic Solutions is his retirement plan, funded by eliminating people who could expose various criminal enterprises connected to defense spending." Sarah felt the full scope of the conspiracy crystallizing in her mind. This wasn't just about covering up past operations or protecting current ones. It was about institutionalizing assassination as a business model protected by the highest levels of government. "Why are you trusting us with this information?" Sarah asked. Martinez smiled, and for a moment Sarah saw echoes of the woman who'd trained her 15 years ago. "Because you're Elena Vasquez, the most effective operator I ever commanded. And because Commander Harrison has the moral courage to act on information most people would ignore to protect their careers." They separated at the parking lot, Martinez disappearing into the morning crowd, while Sarah and Jake made their way to the Honda Civic. As they drove away from Balboa Park, Sarah could see the surveillance teams converging on the location they'd just vacated. "Storage facility first," Jake said, navigating through residential streets to avoid main thoroughfares. "Then we figure out how to stop a coordinated assassination operation with 48 hours of planning time." 36 hours, Sarah corrected. "Martinez said the final briefing is tonight, which means the operation launches tomorrow morning. We need to be in position by midnight." Jake absorbed this timeline, his mind already working through logistical requirements. Assault team of 2 against an unknown number of defenders in a fortified position. We'll need explosives, heavy weapons, tactical gear, and detailed intelligence about the facility layout, all of which should be available at the storage facility, assuming Martinez has been planning this operation as long as she's been gathering intelligence. They drove in tactical silence for several minutes, both processing the magnitude of what they'd committed to attempting. Sarah found herself returning to patterns of thought she'd spent 8 months trying to forget. Target assessment, operational planning, acceptable casualty rates. "There's something else we need to consider," Sarah said finally. "If we succeed in stopping Operation Clean Slate, we become the primary targets for Meridian's remaining assets. They'll dedicate everything to hunting us down. And if we fail, 17 people die tomorrow, and the assassination program becomes a permanent feature of American politics." Sarah nodded, understanding that they'd passed the point where retreat was possible. Elena Vasquez died in a government facility 8 years ago. Sarah Mitchell died when those surveillance teams tracked us to the coffee shop. I don't know who I am anymore, but I know what needs to be done. Jake glanced at her, reading the transformation in her voice and posture. The woman who'd been making sandwiches 36 hours ago was gone, replaced by someone harder and more dangerous. "Any regrets about the life you're leaving behind?" he asked. Sarah considered this question as they drove through neighborhoods where normal people were beginning their normal days, commuting to work, taking children to school, living lives that didn't include classified assassination programs. "Frank Murphy was a good boss," she said finally. "He never asked questions about my past or demanded explanations for skills that didn't match my supposed background. I'll miss the simplicity of making sandwiches. But making sandwiches doesn't stop 17 people from being murdered by their own government." They reached the storage facility in National City 20 minutes later, a sprawling complex of industrial buildings surrounded by chain-link fencing. Unit 247 was located in the facility's most secure section, accessible only through multiple checkpoints and security doors. Sarah used Martinez's key to access the unit, revealing a space that had been converted into a professional intelligence operations center. Wall-mounted displays showed photographs, documents, and organizational charts detailing Meridian's entire structure. Equipment lockers contained weapons, explosives, surveillance gear, and communication devices. Martinez wasn't just gathering intelligence, Jake said, examining the tactical equipment. She was preparing for war. Sarah activated the computer systems, revealing detailed files on every aspect of Meridian's operations. Financial records showed payments to government officials. Operational logs detailed completed assassinations, and personnel files contained psychological profiles of active operatives. "Look at this," Sarah said, highlighting a facility schematic on one of the displays. Meridian's Temecula headquarters, architectural plans, security systems, guard rotations, and personnel assignments. Jake studied the plans, his special operations experience automatically identifying vulnerabilities and approach routes. 12 operatives plus support staff means we're looking at 18 to 24 personnel on site during the final briefing. All of them trained using our techniques, familiar with our tactics, and operating in a facility designed to prevent exactly the kind of assault we're planning. Sarah pulled up additional files showing Meridian's operational calendar. Tomorrow's 17 assassinations were just the beginning. Future operations include foreign political leaders, international business figures, and domestic targets that would reshape American politics over the coming months. "This isn't a one-time operation," Jake said, reading over her shoulder. "It's the beginning of systematic social engineering through targeted elimination." Sarah nodded, understanding that stopping Operation Clean Slate wouldn't end the threat. It would only delay it.
The only way to permanently neutralize Meridian would be to eliminate their operational capability entirely. Martinez was right about one thing, Sarah said, beginning to load tactical gear into equipment bags. We're going to have to do what we were trained to do. Jake helped her prepare the assault equipment, both of them falling into the familiar rhythm of pre-mission preparation. Weapons checks, communication tests, route planning, contingency development. Procedures they'd both performed dozens of times in different contexts. Rules of engagement, Jake asked as they finalized their equipment selection. Sarah looked up from the tactical vest she was adjusting, her expression completely professional. Anyone participating in a program to assassinate American citizens has forfeited their right to due process. We stop them by any means necessary.
Copy that. As they prepared to leave the storage facility, Sarah took one last look at the intelligence displays showing Meridian's complete organizational structure. Tomorrow night, if they succeeded, most of those photographs would represent eliminated threats. If they failed, those same people would be planning the next wave of government-sanctioned murders. Elena Vasquez was back, and she had work to do. The Meridian Strategic Solutions facility outside Temecula was designed to look like a standard corporate campus. Glass buildings, manicured landscaping, and visitor parking that suggested legitimate business operations. But Elena's trained eye immediately identified the defensive modifications hidden within the architectural aesthetics. She and Jake had spent the afternoon conducting surveillance from a ridge overlooking the facility, using high-powered optics to map guard positions, identify entry points, and catalog security measures. The intelligence Martinez had provided was accurate, but seeing the target firsthand revealed additional challenges. Perimeter security includes motion sensors integrated into the landscaping, Elena observed, adjusting her scope to examine the facility's eastern approach. Electronic countermeasures suggest they're jamming unauthorized communications within a half-mile radius. Jake lowered his binoculars, having completed his assessment of the main building's defensive positions. Vehicle barriers disguised as decorative elements, ballistic glass on all ground floor windows, and what appears to be a helicopter landing pad on the roof. The facility consisted of 3 buildings connected by covered walkways, with the main structure housing administrative offices and the operational briefing rooms where Meridian's assassins would be receiving their final instructions. According to Martinez's intelligence, all 12 operatives would be on site from 8 p.m. until the mission launch at dawn. Internal layout matches the architectural plans, Elena said. Heat signatures suggest approximately 24 personnel currently on site, concentrated in the main building's second floor. They had established their observation post at 4 p.m., giving them 4 hours to finalize assault plans before the operational window opened. Elena found herself falling back into tactical thinking patterns she'd hoped never to use again, but the familiar mental discipline was oddly comforting. Primary approach through the Eastern Service entrance, Jake said, reviewing their hand-drawn tactical maps. Explosive breach, neutralize security, advance to second-floor briefing rooms. Secondary approach maintains overwatch position here, provides covering fire, and serves as extraction support if primary approach is compromised. Elena marked positions on the map with precise military notation. Communication protocol switches to hand signals once we're within the jamming radius. Jake checked his equipment one final time: assault rifle, sidearm, body armor, explosives, and communication gear. Everything was military specification, acquired from Martinez's carefully maintained arsenal. Elena's loadout was similar, though she'd added specialized items that reflected her particular expertise. Rules of engagement confirmed, Elena said, her voice carrying no emotion. Anyone inside that building tonight is complicit in tomorrow's assassination operation. No prisoners, no survivors who could identify us or compromise future operations. They moved down from the ridge as darkness fell, using natural terrain to approach the facility's perimeter without triggering motion sensors. Elena's movement was completely silent, every step calculated to avoid detection. Jake followed her lead, impressed by operational skills that exceeded anything he'd learned in Special Forces training.
The eastern service entrance was protected by electronic locks and a single guard, who was more focused on his smartphone than maintaining proper security protocols. Elena approached from his blind spot, using techniques that rendered him unconscious without alerting internal security systems. Jake planted shaped charges on the service door, while Elena disabled the backup alarm systems using equipment from Martinez's collection. The explosive breach would trigger facility-wide alerts, but by then they'd be committed to rapid assault tactics that relied on speed and violence of action. 30 seconds to breach, Jake whispered into his tactical radio, though he knew Elena couldn't receive the transmission within the jamming field. Elena positioned herself for immediate entry, her weapon ready and safety disengaged. Years of civilian life hadn't diminished her tactical reflexes. If anything, the enforced restraint had created a reservoir of controlled aggression that was now focused entirely on the mission. The explosive breach shattered the service door and immediately triggered every alarm system in the facility. Emergency lighting bathed the corridors in red, and automated announcements began directing personnel to security positions. But Elena and Jake were already inside, moving with practiced coordination toward their primary objective. The first security guard they encountered was reaching for his radio when Elena's suppressed weapon eliminated him with clinical precision. Jake advanced past her position, clearing the next corridor while Elena maintained overwatch. Their movement through the building was methodical and devastating. "Stairwell secured," Jake signaled using hand gestures as they reached the main building's second floor. Elena acknowledged and moved to her assigned position, covering the corridor that led to the operational briefing rooms. According to Martinez's intelligence, the 12 Meridian operatives would be receiving final mission parameters in Conference Room B, along with support staff and operational coordinators. Jake planted breaching charges on the conference room door, while Elena positioned herself to engage any personnel attempting to escape through alternate routes. The facility's alarm systems continued wailing, but no external security response had arrived, suggesting Meridian preferred to handle threats internally rather than risk outside scrutiny. "Execute," Elena signaled. The conference room door exploded inward, and Jake immediately engaged multiple targets with controlled bursts of automatic weapons fire. Elena heard suppressed gunshots, shouted commands, and the distinctive sounds of tactical movement, as Jake cleared the room systematically. Through the smoke and chaos, Elena could see 12 individuals in civilian clothes who'd been seated around a large conference table. Operational maps, target photographs, and mission briefing materials were scattered across surfaces that were now stained with blood. These were the people who would have murdered 17 Americans the following morning. Not anymore. Jake emerged from the conference room, his tactical gear splattered with evidence of close-quarters combat. Primary targets neutralized. 6 additional personnel were eliminated attempting to respond to the breach.
Elena nodded, beginning the systematic destruction of operational materials they discovered throughout the facility. Computer hard drives, paper files, communication equipment, everything that could be used to reconstruct Meridian's assassination program needed to be eliminated. "The support building still shows heat signatures," Jake observed, checking his thermal imaging display. "Possible additional personnel or backup operational centers." They moved through the connecting walkway toward the secondary building, maintaining tactical formation and staying alert for remaining threats. The support building contained administrative offices, equipment storage, and what appeared to be a secure communication center with satellite uplinks. Elena discovered the most important prize in a locked office marked Executive Operations, Deputy Defense Secretary Thomas Brennan's personal files detailing his involvement with Meridian's assassination program, financial records, target selection criteria, and correspondence with government officials who'd requested specific eliminations. "This is everything we need to expose the entire network," Elena said, photographing documents with a secure camera that would preserve evidence even if they didn't survive the mission. Jake was destroying computer servers in the communication center when his thermal scanner detected movement in the facility's basement level. Additional personnel below ground, armed and moving toward our position.
Elena immediately shifted to defensive positioning, understanding that surviving security personnel were attempting to trap them in the upper floors. The facility's basement probably contained backup communication systems and emergency escape routes. Extraction Route Alpha is compromised, Jake reported, multiple vehicles approaching from the main access road. Elena activated a small explosive device she'd placed near the building's main electrical systems, plunging the facility into darkness and disabling most of its electronic security measures. Emergency lighting provided minimal illumination, but it also eliminated any technological advantage their opponents might have possessed. Moving through the darkened facility using night vision equipment, Elena and Jake made their way toward their secondary extraction point. Behind them, the operational heart of Meridian's assassination program was burning, both literally and figuratively. The basement personnel had reached the main floor and were attempting to coordinate a response, but their tactical communication was hampered by the jamming equipment they'd installed to prevent unauthorized transmissions. Elena could hear confused shouting and disorganized movement that suggested these were administrative staff rather than operational personnel. Jake led the way to their predetermined extraction route through the facility's western emergency exit. Outside, multiple vehicles had arrived and were disgorging additional security personnel, but their approach was cautious rather than aggressive. They weren't sure what they were dealing with. 24-hour news cycle starts in 6 hours, Elena said as they reached their extraction vehicle. By tomorrow morning, Deputy Defense Secretary Brennan's involvement in Meridian will be front-page news across the country. Jake started the engine while Elena transmitted the photographed documents to multiple news organizations using secure communication protocols. The evidence was now in the hands of journalists who couldn't be silenced through Meridian's usual methods. As they drove away from the burning facility, Elena felt something she hadn't experienced in 8 months, the satisfaction of completing a mission that served legitimate national security interests rather than private criminal enterprises. Casualty count? Jake asked as they reached the main highway. 18 confirmed eliminations, including all 12 operatives scheduled to conduct tomorrow's assassinations. No civilian casualties, no collateral damage to uninvolved personnel. Jake nodded, understanding that Elena's precise accounting reflected professional standards rather than callousness. Every person they'd killed tonight had been directly involved in planning the murder of innocent Americans. "What's our status with remaining Meridian assets?" Jake asked. Elena consulted the intelligence they'd gathered from the facility. Operational capability eliminated. Financial networks compromised. Government protection was removed once Brennan's involvement became public. They'll spend the next 6 months trying to avoid prosecution rather than planning new operations. The highway stretched ahead of them, leading back towards San Diego and a world that would wake up tomorrow morning without knowing how close it had come to systematic political assassination. Elena felt herself thinking about Frank Murphy and the deli where she'd spent 8 months learning to be a normal person. "You could go back," Jake said, reading her thoughts. "With Meridian eliminated and their government connections exposed, the threat to surviving Blackwater assets is essentially neutralized. Sarah Mitchell could return to making sandwiches." Elena considered this possibility as they drove through the night. The woman who'd found peace in the routine of sandwich assembly and customer service hadn't been entirely fictional. There had been genuine satisfaction in that simple, honest work. "Sarah Mitchell was a good person," Elena said finally, "but she was also a lie I told myself because I wasn't ready to accept what I really am." Jake understood. The skills that had made tonight's mission possible weren't something that could be permanently suppressed. Elena Vasquez was a weapon that had been temporarily holstered, not permanently retired. "So, what now?" Jake asked. Elena looked at the documents they'd recovered from Brennan's office, evidence of other criminal enterprises, other networks of corruption that used violence to protect illegal interests. Meridian Strategic Solutions had been just one tentacle of a much larger organism that fed on institutional authority and political protection. "Now, we do what Martinez suggested, eliminate threats to national security using any means necessary." Elena's voice carried the quiet certainty of someone who'd found her purpose. There are other Thomas Brennans out there, other private military companies selling murder as a corporate service. They all need to be stopped. Jake absorbed the implications of what Elena was proposing, a two-person operation targeting the networks of corruption and violence that operated within America's military-industrial complex. No official sanction, no legal protection, no backup except what they could provide each other. Partners? Jake asked. Partners, Elena confirmed. Behind them, the Meridian facility continued burning, sending a column of smoke into the night sky. By morning, news reports would describe it as an industrial accident at a defense contractor facility. The truth would be buried in classified reports that would never see public scrutiny.
But 17 Americans would wake up tomorrow morning and continue their normal lives, unaware that they'd been scheduled for government-sanctioned execution. For Elena, that knowledge was enough to justify everything they'd done tonight. Frank Murphy would wonder why his most reliable employee had disappeared without explanation. The customers at Murphy's Deli would miss the woman who always remembered their orders and served their sandwiches with efficient professionalism. But Elena Vasquez had work to do, and making sandwiches, however satisfying, wasn't going to stop the next network of criminals who thought they could use America's military resources for private gain. The woman behind the deli counter had been a carefully constructed fiction. The woman driving through the California night toward their next mission was completely real and completely dangerous. Deputy Defense Secretary Thomas Brennan would be arrested within 72 hours. Meridian Strategic Solutions would be dissolved within a week. And somewhere in America, another corrupt network would be planning their next operation. Elena would be ready for them. 6 weeks after the Meridian facility burned to the ground, Elena Vasquez sat in a coffee shop in Portland, Oregon, reading the morning news on a tablet while Jake Harrison reviewed architectural plans for their next target. To outside observers, they looked like business travelers discussing a consulting project. In reality, they were planning the systematic dismantling of another shadow network. The aftermath of Meridian's destruction had unfolded exactly as Elena had predicted. Deputy Defense Secretary Thomas Brennan was arrested by FBI agents as he arrived at the Pentagon, charged with conspiracy, murder, and treason. The evidence Elena had photographed led to investigations that revealed a web of corruption spanning multiple government agencies and defense contractors. 17 individuals who'd been scheduled for assassination continued their normal lives, unaware they'd been saved by two people they'd never meet. Senator Elizabeth Warren introduced legislation requiring congressional oversight of all private military contracts. Michael Hastings Jr. published a series of articles exposing the privatization of government assassination programs. Dr. Amanda Chen's surveillance research received federal protection and funding, but Elena knew their victory was incomplete. Brennan had been a middle management figure in a much larger organization. The real architects of America's shadow assassination economy remained untouched, protected by layers of legitimate business and political connections. Phoenix Industries, based in Colorado Springs, Jake said, sliding a file across the table. Defense contractor specializing in personnel management solutions for clients worldwide. Their CEO, Marcus Webb, was Brennan's handler in the Meridian operation. Elena studied the intelligence Jake had gathered through his continued access to military databases. Phoenix Industries employed over 300 people across 12 countries, providing security services that ranged from executive protection to what their internal documents euphemistically called problem resolution. Client list includes pharmaceutical companies, technology corporations, and political organizations spanning both major parties, Elena observed. They're not ideologically motivated, they're purely mercenary. Jake highlighted specific entries in the intelligence file. In the past 18 months, Phoenix operatives have conducted elimination operations in 14 states. Targets included environmental activists, financial whistleblowers, and political candidates who threaten specific corporate interests. Elena absorbed this information while maintaining awareness of their surroundings. The coffee shop was busy with morning commuters, providing excellent cover for their operational planning, but Elena's training demanded constant vigilance. "Security?" she asked. Much more sophisticated than Meridian, Webb learned from Brennan's mistakes. Phoenix operates from multiple facilities, uses compartmentalized communication systems, and maintains operational cells that don't know about each other's activities. Elena nodded, understanding that Phoenix would require a different approach than their direct assault on Meridian's centralized facility. This target would demand patient intelligence gathering, careful infiltration, and precisely timed strikes against multiple objectives. I've identified a vulnerability, Jake continued. Phoenix's annual board meeting is scheduled for next month at a resort in Aspen. All senior leadership, operational commanders, and major clients will be present for 3 days of strategic planning. Elena's tactical mind immediately grasped the opportunity. Concentrated target set, isolated location, limited security options due to the civilian environment. Exactly, but it's also the kind of operation that would require extensive preparation and resources we don't currently possess. Elena smiled, reaching into her briefcase to produce a different set of documents. That's where our new partner becomes relevant. Jake examined the files Elena provided, his expression shifting to surprise as he recognized the official letterhead and classification markings. Defense Intelligence Agency, how did you… Colonel Martinez wasn't the only Blackwater alumnus who survived the program termination. General Patricia Cross now serves as DIA Deputy Director for Special Operations. She's been tracking Phoenix Industries for 2 years, waiting for an opportunity to authorize direct action. The documents detailed a classified DIA investigation into private military companies that had exceeded their authorized scope of operations. Phoenix Industries topped the list of organizations requiring administrative correction, military euphemism for elimination. Cross can provide official sanction for operations against Phoenix, Elena explained, legal protection, logistical support, and access to intelligence resources that would take us months to develop independently. Jake studied the authorization documents, recognizing the significance of what he was proposing. We'd be operating as official government assets again, no more improvised missions or stolen equipment. With one important difference: we choose our targets, we plan our operations, and maintain complete operational autonomy. Cross provides support and legal cover, but doesn't direct our activities.
Elena had spent 3 weeks negotiating this arrangement with General Cross, establishing terms that would allow them to continue their mission while operating within legitimate government authority. The DIA needed operators with their specific skills, and Elena needed resources that exceeded what 2 people could acquire independently. "There's something else," Elena said, producing additional documents. Cross has identified 14 other former Blackwater operatives who've been working independently to target corrupt networks. She's proposing we coordinate our efforts into a unified operation. Jake reviewed the personnel files, recognizing several names from his investigation into Blackwater asset eliminations. These are people who were supposed to be dead or disappeared. Like us, they found that retirement from our profession isn't really possible. The skills we possess create a moral obligation to use them against legitimate threats to national security. Elena's phone buzzed with an encrypted message from General Cross. Phoenix board meeting confirmed. Green light for Operation Righteous Fury. Full resources authorized. Decision time, Elena said, showing Jake the message. We can continue operating as a 2-person team with limited resources, or we can accept official sanction and work with other survivors to take down the entire shadow assassination industry. Jake considered the implications while watching steam rise from his coffee cup. 6 weeks ago, he'd been a naval intelligence officer following routine protocols and avoiding career-threatening complications. Now he was being offered the opportunity to help lead a classified operation targeting American citizens involved in systematic murder for profit. Rules of engagement, he asked. Same as always. Anyone participating in programs to assassinate innocent Americans has forfeited their right to due process. We stop them by any means necessary, with the full authority of the United States government. Jake made his decision. When do we start? Elena gathered their operational materials, preparing to leave the coffee shop and begin the next phase of their mission. General Cross is expecting us in Washington tomorrow morning. Full briefing, team introductions, and mission planning for Operation Righteous Fury. As they prepared to leave, Elena looked around the coffee shop one final time. Normal people conducting normal business, unaware that their safety depended on individuals willing to operate in the shadows to eliminate threats they'd never know existed. "Any final thoughts about the road not taken?" Jake asked, understanding that Elena was contemplating the civilian life she'd abandoned. Sarah Mitchell was making sandwiches when you walked into Murphy's Deli, but Elena Vasquez was always going to surface eventually. The only question was whether it would be by choice or necessity. They walked out into the Portland morning, two people whose official existence had been terminated years ago, but who'd found new purpose in protecting a country that couldn't acknowledge their service. Elena thought briefly about Frank Murphy, who'd probably hired someone new to work the lunch rush at his deli. She hoped the new employee was better at making sandwiches and worse at identifying classified military tattoos. 3 months later, headlines across the country reported the simultaneous arrest of 47 individuals connected to Phoenix Industries. CEO Marcus Webb was found dead in his Aspen hotel room, apparent suicide by gunshot. The note he left behind detailed his involvement in over 200 assassination operations targeting American citizens who'd threatened corporate interests. The investigation that followed revealed the existence of 6 additional private military companies providing similar services. Within a year, all had been eliminated through various means, some through legal prosecution, others through operational accidents that left no surviving personnel to continue their criminal enterprises. Elena Vasquez never returned to making sandwiches, but she found something better, a mission that used every skill she possessed in service of protecting innocent people from those who would murder them for profit. General Cross's classified unit grew to include 23 former Blackwater operatives, all officially dead but very much alive and dedicated to eliminating threats that conventional law enforcement couldn't touch. Jake Harrison discovered that his moral courage had practical applications beyond filing intelligence reports. Leading tactical operations against criminal networks provided the kind of meaningful work that made his previous naval career seem like preparation rather than accomplishment. Together, they became ghosts who hunted other ghosts, invisible operators eliminating invisible threats in a shadow war that would never be officially acknowledged. The American public continued their daily lives protected by people whose names would never appear in history books, whose sacrifices would never be recognized, whose very existence was classified beyond the highest security clearances. Murphy's Deli continued serving excellent sandwiches to the lunch crowd in downtown San Diego. Frank Murphy occasionally wondered what had happened to Sarah Mitchell, his most reliable employee who disappeared without explanation. He never learned that she'd helped save 17 innocent lives and dismantled a criminal conspiracy that reached the highest levels of government. Sometimes the most important work happens in the shadows, performed by people who chose duty over recognition, mission over personal safety, and service over self-interest. Elena Vasquez had spent 8 months learning to be normal, but normal was never who she really was. She was a weapon pointed at the darkness, wielded by people who understood that democracy's survival sometimes requires actions that democracy couldn't officially authorize. The woman who'd made sandwiches with such careful precision brought the same attention to detail to eliminating threats that conventional governments couldn't acknowledge. In coffee shops and diners across America, former Blackwater operatives continued their quiet war against those who would murder Americans for money. They ordered normal meals, paid with normal currency, and conducted conversations that sounded like normal business. But there was nothing normal about their mission, and nothing ordinary about their commitment to protecting a country that had trained them to kill, abandoned them to civilian life, and then discovered it needed them more than ever. Elena Vasquez was no longer making sandwiches. She was making America safer, one eliminated threat at a time. And somewhere in a classified briefing room in Washington, General Cross was planning their next operation against enemies who thought they were untouchable. They were about to learn otherwise.
Frank Murphy hired a new employee to work the lunch rush, a pleasant woman in her 40s who made excellent sandwiches and never asked questions about the previous employee who'd left so abruptly. She was efficient, reliable, and completely unremarkable. Her name was Rebecca Martinez, and she'd been dead for 15 years. But that's another story entirely. 1 year later, a different woman stood behind the counter at Murphy's Deli, assembling sandwiches with the same methodical precision that had once characterized Sarah Mitchell's work. Her name tag read Rebecca, and regular customers had grown accustomed to her efficient service and professional demeanor. Frank Murphy watched her work with satisfaction. After Sarah's inexplicable disappearance, he'd worried about finding another employee who could handle the lunch rush with such competence. Rebecca had appeared 2 days after he'd posted the Help Wanted sign, bringing references he couldn't verify and skills that seemed perfectly suited to the job. "Turkey Club, light mayo," Rebecca called out, sliding the wrapped sandwich across the counter to a businessman who barely looked up from his phone. The lunch crowd moved through its familiar rhythm, office workers grabbing quick meals, construction crews ordering multiple sandwiches, tourists discovering one of San Diego's hidden gems. Normal people living normal lives, protected by systems they'd never understand. Rebecca noticed details the customers didn't. The businessman checking his phone had calluses on his trigger finger that suggested military or law enforcement background. The woman ordering a vegetarian wrap positioned herself to watch both entrances, surveillance awareness that indicated professional training. The elderly man who always ordered pastrami carried himself with the bearing of someone accustomed to command authority. San Diego attracted people with interesting backgrounds, and Murphy's Deli served many of them lunch. At 2:30 p.m., as the lunch rush wound down, Rebecca received a text message on her secure phone. "Operation complete. Phoenix eliminated. Moving to Seattle for my next target." She deleted the message immediately, her expression never changing as she continued wiping down the workspace. Elena Vasquez and Jake Harrison were somewhere in Colorado, having successfully dismantled another private assassination network. Their work continued, invisible and unacknowledged, protecting democracy from those who would murder it for profit. Rebecca Martinez understood the importance of such work. She'd trained Elena 15 years ago, faked her own death to continue fighting threats that the conventional government couldn't address, and now found herself serving sandwiches while coordinating the most classified anti-terrorism operation in American history. The irony wasn't lost on her. 2 former Blackwater operatives had worked at Murphy's Deli, separated by months and circumstances, but united by the same mission: protecting innocent people from those who would harm them. Frank Murphy approached the counter as Rebecca finished her afternoon cleaning routine. "You've been a godsend," he said, his weathered face showing genuine appreciation. "I don't know what happened to Sarah, but I'm grateful you showed up when you did." Rebecca smiled, the expression reaching her eyes in a way that Sarah Mitchell's never quite had. Sometimes people find exactly what they need, exactly when they need it. As Frank headed to his office to count the day's receipts, Rebecca's phone buzzed with another message. 17 assets now active. The next briefing is scheduled. Democracy remains secure. She locked the front door of Murphy's Deli and walked into the San Diego afternoon, another day of normal work completed. Tomorrow she'd return to make more sandwiches, serve more customers, and coordinate operations that kept America safe from enemies who operated in the shadows. The woman who'd trained Elena Vasquez was now living the same cover life Elena had abandoned. But Rebecca had advantages Elena hadn't possessed: official support, unlimited resources, and a network of operators who'd chosen duty over recognition. Somewhere in America, former government assassins working as bartenders, mechanics, teachers, and shop clerks. All of them officially dead, all of them very much alive, all of them dedicated to eliminating threats that democracy couldn't officially acknowledge. They were democracy's immune system, invisible antibodies eliminating infections before they could spread. The most important work in America was being done by people who didn't exist, protecting a country that couldn't thank them. Rebecca Martinez made excellent sandwiches. She also made America safer, one eliminated threat at a time. The lunch rush would return tomorrow, bringing new customers and new challenges. Some would be normal people living normal lives. Others would be warriors hiding in plain sight, conducting the most important mission in the world while maintaining perfect cover as ordinary citizens.
Frank Murphy's Deli served the best sandwiches in San Diego. It also served as headquarters for operations that would never appear in any official record, conducted by people whose names were carved on tombstones despite their very real presence behind the counter. Democracy tasted like turkey on wheat with light mayo, served by a dead woman who was very much alive and completely committed to keeping it that way. The story of Sarah Mitchell was over. The story of America's shadow guardians was just beginning. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.